Yo, 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 yo! You're tuning in live to the only pirate radio station that'll make your robot sweat and swoon. Jet Set Radio Future! Check this out. We had a 20-year anniversary recently. Kicking it live for 20 years with you guys? I'm getting all emotional. But things weren't always this way. Let me take you back to a time when things were very different. This is a story about corrupt governments, fights over the control of the streets, and the skater gang that stopped it all. Make sure you're tuning in live with your host DJ DeNelson as I take you through one of the most craziest times these streets have ever seen. Kick it.
Understand the concept of love. Understand the concept of love. Understand the concept of love.
The year is 2000. Video game publishing company Sega had split its talent into various different studios. One of these development houses saw a fusion of developers coming from Panzer Dragoon, sports games, and PC conversion staff. This was Smilebit, a development studio well known for its high-end suite of game releases. One of these was the graffiti-fueled inline skating Sega Dreamcast platformer known as Jet Set Radio, or Jet Grind Radio in the West. A breath of fresh air for the video game industry, Jet Set Radio painted the way for cel-shaded graphics, while also honing in on relevant cultural zeitgeists and momentum-based platforming for a game that would become one of the greatest in Sega's catalog. The aftermath of Jet Set Radio saw it do very well critically, but financially, it ran into some trouble. The game failed to meet sales expectations in Japan, and the Dreamcast, as well as Sega themselves, were on the decline. This caused the developers at Smilebit to look towards the West for the audience of Jet Set Radio's sequel, as that area of the world seemed more accepting of the concept. This may also coincide with the team's decision to develop the sequel solely for Microsoft's new Xbox console. The Xbox wasn't catching on in Japan as much as it was for the West, so this would be the perfect platform for their Western target audience. Furthermore, project's lead programmer, Kazuhisa Hasuoka, stated in a GameSpy interview that the Xbox development environment was very familiar to him, and he even said it was, quote, fun working with this new hardware. This is supported by the fact that the Xbox and Dreamcast shared very similar specs, including the use of programming languages Visual C and C++. Those elements most likely cemented the platform for Jet Set Radio's successor. As for the approach the developers would take for the gameplay of the project, during the development of the first Jet Set, director Masayoshi Kikuchi explained that during that time, the team thought of many new ideas as they went along. New ideas that wouldn't fit in the first game's project plan. So, they shelved them, and kept them to the side for the next version of the game. Smilebit also wanted to create something totally different. They wanted to rethink the concept of the game, build things from the ground up. Smilebit used the first Jet Set Radio as a base, and expanded upon it for the sequel's concept, ultimately in an attempt to take it in a new direction. And this new direction came, in part, in the form of an observation the developers made about the first game. Kikuchi noted that, quote, the Dreamcast version was more of an action game, and that, quote, this time we wanted to make more of an action-adventure game. This saw Jet Set Radio sequel acquire a larger world, enhancing the exploration aspect of the game. The developers wanted to, quote, create a game in which it was fun to just mess around in. To achieve this, Smilebit expanded environments, making more room for the player to move around and experiment. They also looked into user feedback when it came into the input. Kikuchi said that, quote, there were concerns over the controls with the Dreamcast version, so we changed the control system, and during some game shows like E3 and Tokyo Game Show, I would actually watch people play and see what they were having problems with, what buttons were being used the most, and what people were more comfortable with. I tried to implement that kind of feedback, my own experience of watching people play. All of this, from the new direction to the focus on player accessibility, led to a look toward the future. Jet Set Radio Future, which released first in Japan on February 22, 2002, with the North American and PAL releases following soon after. Jet Set Radio Future's release was a big deal. It was a launch title for the Xbox in Japan. There was even a contest worldwide where players could send in graffiti submissions for a chance that their art may appear in the official release. Players were excited, and once the game was out and in everyone's hands, players were more than pleased. Additionally, Future received favorable reviews from a variety of outlets. However, the consensus seemed to be, and still seems to be, that this game doesn't quite reach the heights of its predecessor. I disagree. I see Jet Set Radio Future as an improvement upon its predecessor on almost all fronts. Its gameplay evolved and changed for the better. Its look, more sleek and stylized. And its soundtrack, the best ever made. And so I think some of that, with the added fact that the original Jet Set Radio's 20th birthday passed recently, and with Future being one of the most formative games I've played, that all motivated me to play through the game once again and make this video. I wanted to make sure with this playthrough that I got everything out of Future that I could, so I completed 100% of the game this time around, getting all the stuff you can possibly acquire. A first for me. Through this most recent playthrough of Jet Set Radio Future, I've come to fall in love with the game all over again. But there were some less desirable aspects of the software I forgot about, and I have quite a bit to say about the positives and negatives of Smilebit's magnum opus. So, with this revisiting, I hope I can convince you to pick up and play Jet Set Radio Future for yourself, and I hope you stick with me as I dig deep into a video game that's influenced me greatly. I think, to make my views clear, the best place to start would be what Jet Set Radio as a franchise is. Because when you say platformer, you think of something like Super Mario. But these games are a bit far from that. Instead of a family-friendly game, accessible to most who pick it up, the Jet Set Radio games are much more alternative. Jet Set Radio and Jet Set Radio Future are games based off of popular 90s cultural trends. There's a lot of attitude to the worlds within. When creating the series, director Kikuchi name-checked Lupin III, the manga Tekken Kinkreet, and the big beat music genre in a recent US Gamer article. All very distinctive works, all known partially for pushing the boundary, being edgy, and calling attention to themselves. And how this concentrates into a game is through roller skater gangs, controlling governments, and artistic expression, the core gameplay of which sees you controlling one of these skate gangs in this world, using your skills to ride around the streets of Tokyo-to, a fictional version of Japan's capital. In both the original game and in Future, you play as the GGs, as they fight for the streets in graffiti-based turf wars with rival gangs. Meanwhile, Tokyo-to is slowly being taken over by the Rokaku government, who seeks to squash creative freedom and rid the youth who rebel against them. In each game, you'll move around in 3D environments, built upon exploration, level memorization, and physics-based skating. How that's all laid out and structured is where the two games start to differ mechanically. I think one of the most evident improvements Jet Set Radio Future has over its predecessor is the way its world is designed. If you go back and play the original Jet Set Radio, which I did for the first time this year, you'll notice how most of the areas in that game are compartmentalized. They're big square rooms connected by hallways. The interesting bits are what's inside. planes at varying heights, obstacles, grind rails linking everything together, and points of interest are always what you'll find within each room. Meanwhile, all of these rooms would be under the umbrella of the wider area, and those wider areas could only be switched between depending on the mission you're playing. But in Jet Set Radio Future, everything is much more connected. The rooms mentioned before are now larger, and the wider areas can be traveled between at any point for any reason. That last point can happen in Future because it isn't so reliant on a rigid mission-based system like the Dreamcast game. Like its environments, the progression of Jet Set Radio Future flows more naturally. The time limits are mostly gone. This creates a better sense of freedom while playing the game. And while this may seem like a change in design to have come out of the development specifically for this sequel, the director of the project, Kikuchi, states otherwise. According to him, this concept of creating a connected city, somewhat akin to what you would find in the real world, originates from the first Jet Set Radio's development. But time constraints and hardware limitations forced the team to hold off on that. But with the then next-gen technology of the Xbox, Smilebit was able to put in not only a bigger, more connected world, but they also put in a lot of detail, like the cars that drive around in the game. In the first Jet Set Radio, they would mindlessly move as programmed. In Future, the cars will actually stop for the player if they're in front of them. There are also a lot more of them, creating the illusion of city traffic more faithfully. There are also the billboards hung throughout each cityscape, all of which are different. And there are crowds of bystanders, which are big and dense. Kikuchi points out that these pedestrians aren't just standing around. Some are going to work, or feeding pigeons, or cheering at TVs, or making out in an alleyway. These NPCs will also dive out of the way if you move towards them, and will chastise you for disturbing them. Of course, the biggest changes to come from this are the ones to the gameplay and flow of Future. As mentioned prior, the maps in Jet Set Radio Future are much more expanded than its predecessor. In a lesser game, creating more surface area such as this would result in stretching out gameplay so much that traveling from one point to the next would get old after a while. But Smilebit manages to make exploration much more of a focal point in their environment designs. The developers even mention as much in an interview where they stated in GameSpy that, quote, "We wanted to make it more adventure-like." The levels this time around loop back on themselves more. There are also spots that you'll pass and can't go back, meaning there are intended directions the developers put you through. Even with this leading of the player, new players can get a feeling of being lost in these environments, at least enough to make you stop and look around at all of your options to see what's available to you. The levels can also be taller, creating moments where you may fall and take damage, or even fall into pits and rivers. You'll also find that as you go further into the levels, they reinforce your learned skills very nicely. You'll be pulling off complicated techniques without even realizing it, and the environments are just as dense, if not more so, than its predecessor. There are normally multiple ways to get to one place, or areas that require you to think multi-directionally. Therefore, with this new focus on larger environments and exploration, Smilebit supplies players with a 3D map they can reference in the pause menu at any time. This simplistic blue map can be rotated, and will show the locations of key collectibles, objectives, and level exits. I like the inclusion of this map for sure, and it's something Jet Set Radio needed, but I do have a couple of issues regarding some design decisions Smilebit took with this feature. For one, most of these 3D maps are simplistic, being mostly blue and polygonal. Most of what this map shows is the outermost walls of the level. Anything in the middle of that is mostly absent or abstract. For comparison, the maps in Metroid Prime, a game released in the same year as Jet Set Radio Future, are very similar, but the rooms are tight enough in that game to tell precisely where you are and what you can expect up ahead. Meanwhile, the designs of Future's 3D map system are empty and more obscure. And this isn't helped with there being no zoom feature, or with the fact that the level exit names on the map are flashing and floating in mid-air. These names would normally get in the way of important information at times, and weren't very representative of where the exits actually were in the physical levels themselves. I don't think the 3D map is a wholly awful feature. You can use it well enough to ascertain where you are in relation to collectibles or objectives, but it does leave a lot to be desired. It's mostly there to accommodate the bigger maps and that feeling of adventure. Another way Jet Set Radio Future grows its exploration is with its flow. In the original Jet Set Radio, the game was strung together by missions you would select via a map in your garage. You would then go into whatever section of Tokyo To that mission took place in, and would always have to complete some objective in an allotted time. It's not a terrible system by any means, but there's clearly more potential to be had here. Case in point, Future's various scenarios are laid out in such a way where each transitions into the other very seamlessly. As mentioned prior, the time limits are mostly gone, the objectives are more varied and inspired, and the environments are strung together in such a way to where, once you're familiar with the world layout, you'll be able to go to your intended destination as if it were second nature. Speaking of which, let's talk about some of the specific environments you'll be skating through in Future, cause they're all great in their own specific ways. The world of Jet Set Radio Future is split 4 ways. One main hub that goes to 3 areas, each area with their own set of levels and adheres to its own aesthetics. To the north, there's the daytime city areas. This includes Chuo Street, Hikage Street, and the iconic Shibuya Terminal. These areas embody the hustle and bustle of real-life Shibuya, with plenty of crowds and traffic flowing through its streets, as well as the avenues being lined with commercial shops. Then to the west are the sunset-drenched residential zones and underground sewage areas. The outdoor areas look beautifully nostalgic, with their orange hues and dense environments, while the sewers are dark, sinister blue, and weave in and out like a maze. Then finally to the east are the nighttime areas. These areas feature a towering skyscraper district, a street full of neon nightlife, and a theme park suspended in the air. Amongst these 3 main zones, you have a mix of returning stages from the previous game that have been revamped with improved design, and new stages that offer new territory for the series in terms of ideas and execution. The area that got the biggest overhaul, though, is that main hub that ties everything together, your garage. In the previous Jet Set Radio game, your garage acted kind of like an interactive menu, where you could confusingly cycle between different options until you reached what you wanted. In Future, the garage becomes literally interactive. It's a place where you can skate around, practice your skills, talk to your gang members, and converse with a robot on changing graffiti and partaking in street challenges. The garage has also exploded outside of its small room, pretty much getting rid of the meaning of its namesake. It's now a large box area in a construction site. You can see buildings all around you, and grind on various girders, half-finished foundations, and half-pipes. It's a fantastic improvement on the garage concept, and becomes a natural feeling home for you to come back to as you're playing through the rest of the game. But the garage isn't all that's notable in terms of where you can go. For example, there's the Shibuya Terminal, where the streets are lined with traffic. There are several overpasses and road guardrails to grind on in order to travel between the terminal's many vertical layers. There are even bus awnings you can land on top of. Meanwhile, the Skyscraper District and Faro Park share a space in a sea of tall, commercial high-rise buildings. There's an ancient Egyptian theme park at its middle, and 2 side paths that lead onto the rooftops of the city. And who can't forget the Tokyo Underground Sewage Facility, which, as I said earlier, is very complicated compared to the other areas in the game. It's this blue tiled web of hallways and rooms that you have to dive in and out of, executing a series of high-level moves while also keeping in mind everything that's in front of you. There are many a great environmental set piece in Jet Set Radio Future. No setting, I think, is forgettable. But there is one problem with certain environments that can't go ignored. At least, when it comes to playing Jet Set Radio Future on the Xbox 360, apparently. Reportedly, this problem doesn't happen if you're playing this game on the original Xbox. I guess the emulation software on the 360 disagrees with Future software in some way. Anyway, the problem I'm referencing at is the extreme slowdown you'll experience in certain parts of the game. Like in 99th Street, which is a nighttime level split into 3 sections, and has this cool looking dragon tower in the middle of it. But this dragon tower also has a bunch of water pouring out of it, which I think causes the game to almost stop in its tracks. This slowdown is very literal, in where the game's speed will reduce so much that you'll think you're playing in slow motion. And this can be very detrimental to your input. Things like jump arcs, momentum, and grind combos can be drastically affected by this near stoppage. You can kind of get around it by paying close attention to your character's animation state, and look for their normal animations to start playing in order to know when to pull off your next trick, but it's not a reliable method. It's unfortunate this slowdown is in the game, and that it's so noticeable and affecting to the gameplay, but if you're playing this on the Xbox 360, you kinda have to live with it, and find ways to play around it. But while explaining the unfortunate slowdown, I touched upon something that equally defines Jet Set Radio Future more than the environments, and that's how the game plays. Input is the foundation for any game. In fact, a game cannot be if it doesn't have its players. So, the creators of games take great care in how players interact with them. There is a whole school of thought on how games' input should be built. For example, when it comes to platformers, video games where players control a character that must use the environment around it to get from point A to B, there is a strong opinion that the input of such should be responsive, tactile, and simple. But all 3 of those things are what Jet Set Radio is not to some degree. As a 3D platformer, Jet Set Radio and Jet Set Radio Future rely on more physics and momentum-based movement, and this is because of its focus on characters that skate around a move. It wouldn't make sense or feel right if movement felt responsive like a Mario game. Instead, Smilebit went with this more complex movement system as their mechanical base, and built Jet Set Radio around that. It completely flies in the face of platforming input norms, and I think the series as a whole is a lot better for it. It makes the gameplay more memorable, more unique, and more satisfying. And it's not like Smilebit made a hard-to-grasp movement system and then throw you out to the dogs. They don't do that. They take special care in designing levels that reinforce learned mechanics and teach new ideas subconsciously, as well as giving the player optional tutorials that they can reference at any time if they need a refresher. And Smilebit isn't afraid to stop the game dead in its tracks to teach the player super important mechanics that need special attention. So, it's not like either of the games in the Jet Set Radio franchise are inaccessible. They're extremely accessible, but they do take time to get used to. And if I were to pick the game with the better sense of input, I would say Jet Set Radio Future is the more approachable option. And that's because there are all sorts of quality of life features that make things easier on the player. That being said, not everything related to control goes over super smoothly, so to dive into that, let's start with Future's movement. As a 3D platformer, you move around in all directions, forward, backward, left and right, and verticality is taken into account often. To move, you just push the control stick in the direction you want to go in. However, you won't start at top speed. Rather, you'll see a ramp shape in the bottom right of the UI. This visually communicates your current speed in relation to how much speed you could be getting. This is where momentum comes in, as the longer you move, the more speed you gain, and going down ramps or grinding down rails will speed you up even more than that. You may also notice the camera is a bit weird to come to grasp with compared to modern day controls. In a normal third-person game, you'd expect to control the camera's look direction with the right stick, but I guess that concept wasn't yet popular, as moving the right stick in Jet Set Radio Future only puts you in first-person mode, which is cool for getting a closer look at things, but you can't move while in this. Instead, the camera automatically repositions itself behind your back after inputting again, which is definitely weird and takes some time to get used to, but it's not terrible, especially since most of the game's environments flow you through a specific direction having control of the camera isn't entirely necessary. You will need to reposition in a few instances though. Luckily there's a dedicated button that will snap the camera around to the player's back immediately. This is great for sharp turns or sudden changes in movement direction. The biggest problem I would say I had with the camera would happen whenever I would spray graffiti, which is another form of input in Jet Set Radio. A lot of the scenarios in the game revolve around you collecting paint cans around the levels, and using them to spray the streets of Tokyo-to, and rival opposition at times with said spray paint. You spend some whenever you push the spray graffiti button, and each character has a limit on how many graffiti spray cans they can carry, so there can be some item management while you're playing the game. You can even pull off a quick boost that will bring you to max speed by pushing a button to spend 10 paint cans. Anyway, how you spray graffiti on surfaces is pretty simple. You go up to these circle symbols and hold the spray graffiti button to execute the action. These tagging sections come in many different sizes, so the amount of spray cans you'll need to complete the tag can vary. The camera problems come in once you start spraying at any of these tagging locations. The camera will break from behind your back for an angle that contains both you and the graffiti you're spraying. It's a neat shot, but the change in angle still affects your movement direction, so the harsh change can definitely ruin your flow. As I said, it's the only real issue I have with the camera, and even then, there are a few movement mechanics Smilebit put in to help alleviate this a little. One is the shuffle. It's a function that locks your movement speed and direction, so you don't have to worry about that while you spray. Just push in the stick. Another has to do with grinding. Let's actually back up a bit and discuss grinding, as it's a very prominent mechanic in Jet Set Radio Future. For Jet Set Radio Future, designer Masayoshi Yokoyama stated in a US Gamer interview that the team at Smilebit, quote, really pushed this grind action to the forefront. Grinding is an action that happens whenever you jump on a thin, long surface like a guardrail or a wire. You can even grind up telephone poles and do backflips when you jump off of them. You use your skates to quickly skim along these surfaces without really having to press anything. When you grind, it's a faster, more convenient way of getting around to different places. And compared to the first Jet Set Radio, grinding in Future is almost the core movement itself. That's how much you do of it in this game. I think this comes for the better, as it provides a greater sense of speed and comfort, and gives you a little more time to think without worrying about putting in where you need to go. But if you want, you can alter your grind a bit with a few techniques. One I was teasing earlier. If you pull the control stick towards you while you're grinding, your character will slow down. This is great for spraying large graffiti tags. Opposite of that, you can speed up your grind by pulling off tricks. These seem simple to pull off at first. You just tap the X or Y buttons to do one. But the skill comes in where you have to pull them off rhythmically. Both buttons have their own rhythms that can be a bit difficult to master individually. Ingeniously though, Smilebit designed these rhythms in such a way where if you press each button interchangeably, the rhythms sync up quite well. Of course, it will still take a bit to master properly, so practice is key. You know you fail the rhythm once you hear a loud bass sound play. The Y button is particularly interesting to me, as when you press it while grinding, or while you're moving in general, you'll turn around. But the most this does is cause you to skate or grind backwards. It doesn't actually change your direction, which is disappointing because I think an actual turnaround feature could be quite useful when you're grinding, as when you grind, you only go in one direction. The only way to change direction is to jump off the rail. It'd be great to change direction while grinding, especially when you are high up above ground, so that you don't have to risk much. And speaking of jumping off, I do wish attaching to grind rails was a little less sensitive. Sometimes you could try to jump off, only to cling back onto the rail again. This happened in the last game too, so it's unfortunate Smilebit never got around to fixing this issue. Aside from grinding and moving, you can also jump into billboards and a few walls to wall ride, which is like a quick grind on a surface, perpendicular to the ground. This is useful for going across gaps. I already mentioned it, but you can jump around as well. The quicker your speed, the longer and higher your jumps are. The falling speed is slow, which is great for repositioning yourself somewhere when you jump. Another big part of control is the new half-pipe mechanics presented in Future. In the previous Jet Set Radio, there were half-pipes, but the slope detection was wonky, and there wasn't much in the way of input in terms of how you interacted with these. Jet Set Radio Future, however, improves its slope detection immensely. The sizes of the half-pipes are a bit scaled down, but now your character naturally rocks between its two ends. There are a few tricks you can pull off while in a half-pipe. First, you can grind on its two edges. As long as you move to an edge, you'll automatically snap into a grind. But if you jump at the right time while approaching an edge, you'll perform an air, which is a jump somewhat akin to what skateboarders do when they ride half-pipes. These airs are pretty good at getting you some height, though if you want to gain even more speed and verticality, you can pull off a hand plant. A hand plant can be executed by pressing the X button at just the right time when approaching a half-pipe edge. Your character will stand on the edge with one hand, and once you let go, your character will rush to the other side of the half-pipe at top speed. Pull off an air when this happens, and you'll launch yourself higher than before. These half-pipe mechanics make the sewer areas a treat, as you have to use the airs and hand plants in conjunction with approach to angles in order to get onto catwalks and get over barricades. To close out what you can do in terms of input in Jet Set Radio Future, there's the lock-on feature, where it's exactly what it sounds like. You can lock on to certain rivals, which is great for combative scenarios. For example, one thing Jet Set Radio Future and its predecessor shares are tag battles, where you chase around rival gang members on their turf, trying to tag their backs enough to incapacitate them. In the original Jet Set Radio, these tag battles worked well enough, though the camera centering function was mapped to the same button that you would use to spray graffiti. Thus, these battles could get very jerky and awkward. In Future, since the camera centering function is mapped to a different button, that issue doesn't exist here, and instead, you can now lock onto the rival gang in order to tag their backs more easily. It's a big improvement, though it takes more paint to incapacitate the rival gang members, which is a negative in my viewpoint, seeing as it drags out tag battles for too long. Another way the lock-on feature helps out a lot is with an aspect exclusive to Future: police combat. Yes, you can now actually fight back against the police. In fact, the police act quite differently in this game compared to its predecessor. In the original, the police's presence would get progressively more suffocating, adding on more and more, sometimes to a detriment. Here, the police only show up every once in a while. In fact, the way police are handled are better here in Future, as they don't constantly interrupt you while you're spraying graffiti and trying to get other things done. Instead, they'll appear out of nowhere and box you in, stopping any kind of progress until you take care of them all. And how you take care of them is by knocking them down and spraying their backs. You can even combine your lock-on with your boost dash to get a bunch down in a row. Meanwhile, the police will try to latch onto your back, whittling down your health in the process. If you're not careful, they can even stun you, taking away your ability to move for a bit, which leaves you open for another attack, and can even be dangerous if you are stunned while moving, as the momentum stays. Luckily, if you get damaged too much, you can break off from the action and find red paint cans, which will restore your health. As you progress through Future Story, what the police use gets progressively more excessive, like heavies that need to be knocked down with the boost dash, or giant robots that have to be tagged in pieces. They even send in tanks and helicopters to try and take your Skating Street gang down. This police force is initially led by Captain Hayashi, a figure with more personality and presence than Jet Set Radio's Onigashima. Hayashi is more fringe. He's more manic and more psychotic, yet at the same time, you can definitely tell he's fragile and wimpy in the way government bootlickers are. He gets mad and violent at the smallest of mistakes, and doesn't hold back on telling his troops to kill these kids. This is a very interesting character, and he's not the only one. There are a whole cast of colorful, memorable characters in Jet Set Radio Future. There are a lot of new characters that make an appearance, as well as some returning faces from the first Jet Set Radio. Though those that are returning have had a redesign to fit Future's more slick and mature aesthetic. An aesthetic that sees a bit of a loss of saturation, but pays off with a more cohesive and appropriate look. Smilebit even does some really cool effects with the new visuals, like motion lines on the UI, or even on the characters themselves. Some of these returning characters changed so much that even their names had to be swapped out for something else, like Mew becoming Riff, or Tab becoming Corn. This trend of new characters and returning redesigned favorites even extends to the rival gangs in the game. You've got legacy gangs like Poison Jam and the Noise Tanks, as well as fresh blood like Rapid 99 and the Immortals. Some characters even had their whole role switched, like Goth Punk Cube now being the leader of Poison Jam. Which brings up another good point. There are a lot more characters in the story, much more of an emphasis on different roles being played, and more writing that went into that. Like with the pending mayor of Tokyo-to himself, Goji Rokaku. Goji doesn't get much screen time and lines until the end of the game, but when he does, he's zany, crazy even. He's obsessed at making the world into his own vision. And his voice. Where have I heard this voice before?
Supreme culture! Rokaku Bonsai Radio! Arigato, ohtoi gozaimasu! To start off the night.
I'm tired.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you personally for gathering here today. However, this tower is not finished, and that is why I need you. All of you. With your voices, we can complete this tower of ultimate beauty together.
That's right, that's Charles Martinet, the voice of Mario. Leave it to Sega to make the antagonist bent on taking over Tokyo's artistic freedom to share a voice with the flagship character of their rival. Of course, the main characters of Jet Set Radio Future is the gang you play as, the GGs. The GGs are a big collection of eclectic characters that you can pick from. Each character has their own style, dance, and stats. Like, one skater can be really good at jumping, while another can hold more paint cans. When you begin the game, the GGs only start out with 3 members, Gum, Corn, and the new recruit Yo-Yo. As you go further into the game, more characters will become available to you, though some of these take skill to unlock. What I mean by that is that some of the characters can be found hanging out in the world. When you approach them, they'll normally challenge you to some sort of race or skill test. Battering them in these will cause them to join your crew. Some of these characters can be pretty tough to unlock, so make sure your skills and knowledge of the area are on point. You can change up who you're playing as at your garage or at any of the save points that you spray down while out in the world. These are pretty cool, and a unique way of treating a save point. The saves in this game happen in a lightning instant. Plus, whenever you change a character at these, you get this great animation transition where your previous character will throw a paint can into the air, and the new character you picked will catch it, all in one fluid motion. Of course, a conversation about Jet Set Radio's characters would not be complete without talking about the colorful and charismatic DJ Professor K. For the uninitiated, DJ Professor K is the host, runner, and narrator of the titular radio station Jet Set Radio. He's got lightning bolt hair, great taste and style, and presence like no other. It's hard to mistake him, he's one of a kind. Anytime he speaks, his mouth opens big and wide like a speaker. His mannerisms are animated and expressive, and his demeanor is pretty interesting in future. In the first Jet Set Radio, DJ Professor K was definitely more kooky, but in future, not only is this host animated, but he's got a serious side to him as well. He's also more suave and a little less abrasive with his personality. He also takes more of a storyteller role in Future, usually opening up with something energetic and fun, then going into a more focused, explanatory mode. K plays more of a role when you're out in the streets as well. He compliments you when you pull off tricks, and gives you updates when you complete objectives. I think these changes make him an even better character than what was presented in the original. He's got more depth and involvement now. But, of course, a DJ is only as good as his tunes, so how's the music he plays?
Fly like a butterfly. Fly like a butterfly. Fly like a butterfly. Fly like a butterfly.
That's nice. Wild and wonderful.
Like a fly, like a butterfly.
Well, given that the soundtrack to this game is one of my favorite musical projects of all time, it's safe to say that I really love what this game does sonically. Big beat, indie rock, acid house, techno, hip-hop, and trip-hop are all sounds that make up this eclectic set of tracks, each as memorable as the last. I dare you to find a set of video game tracks that are as consistent and varied, all at the same time, and all backing the themes of the game it's based on. This is the music of legend, I truly think so. Jet Set Radio Future's soundtrack is one of the most essential video game related listenings you can partake in, regardless if you've actually played Future or not. And it's hard to ignore, partially because Jet Set Radio Future is one of the loudest games I've played. My levels while recording were constantly in the red. I had to turn my TV way down to what I usually have it on for other games just to get this game at a reasonable volume. It's aggressive and I love it, because that's what Jet Set Radio is all about. The way the music works in the game is pretty special. As mentioned prior, the music is fed to you via a virtual radio station, but because it's a video game, a DJ isn't picking the tracks, and the music the radio station has at its disposal is limited, so the flow of the music tracks you experience isn't so much of a radio station as much as it is a repeating playlist. But even with such a limitation, Smilebit does great things with this. For one, each section of the game, the three I talked about earlier, has its own playlist, meaning each section has its own sound, which keeps things sonically fresh. Another thing the developers do is add great DJ-like transitions between tracks. I like these a lot because it really gets you excited to hear what's coming next, puts a memorable hook in your head, and keeps the flow of the music going without any jarring interruptions. But what about the songs themselves? Well, Jet Set Radio Future project manager Richard Briggs said it best in an Xbox Addict interview. Quote, "This time around, not only did we license killer tracks from top Grand Royal artists, in addition, our own Wavemaster development studio put together their usual magic, and rounded out the other half of the soundtrack to bring the total count to 30 songs. It's true, there are precisely 30 tracks from a range of different artists. As said in the quote, a few of them came from the now defunct Grand Royal record label. Grand Royal was a record label set up by New York City hip-hop legends, the Beastie Boys. It housed a number of artists. The ones that show up on Jet Set Radio Future are Brand Van 3000, BS 2000, The Prunes, and the Latch Brothers. That last group, Latch Brothers, are important to the soundtrack, as the only reason the artists mentioned prior to them even show up in the track listing is because the Latch Brothers remixed them, which isn't a bad thing at all. The Latch Brothers have this very spatial quality about their sound, where all their tracks, original or remixes, are slathered in reverb and psychedelia. It makes sense that a majority of their work ends up in the sewers, a place that's dark, dank, and full of walls for sound to bounce off of. Another interesting tidbit about this trio is that one of them is Michael Diamond, aka Mike D of the Beastie Boys, who provides rapping for some of the tracks here. Furthermore, BS2000's MC is Adam Horovitz, aka Ad Rock, also one of the Beastie Boys, meaning we get 2/3 of the legendary hip-hop trio on this video game soundtrack. Aside from the artist Grand Royal provided, there were acts from other third-party labels as well, such as Biss, a small indie rock group from the UK. Their driving punk rock anthem, Statement of Intent, shows up here on the soundtrack. It's led by these contrasting female and male shout vocals and this tight drum beat. There's also Scapegoat Wax, an American indie rap rock group whose Aisle 10 is a smooth 90s jam, only broken by some throaty screams at the end. Russell Simmons, famous for being the drummer in the John Spencer Blues Explosion, also has a track called I'm Not a Model, indicative of the more rock-centric big beat that was forming in the States. Then there are the returning favorites Guitar Vader, a Japanese indie garage rock act who's got 2 tracks that show up here, one from their From Dusk album and a remix from one of their early mixtapes. Finally, there is Birthday Cake by one of my favorite trip-hop groups of all time, Shibo Mato. Birthday Cake is this bold fusion of heavy rock samples and hip-hop, which, coupled with Miho Hattori's vocals, make for one of the most shrill songs on the soundtrack. It's one of the most divisive tracks in the Jet Set Radio community, from what I understand, which I think is a shame, because it's easily one of the catchiest, wildest, and most explosive tracks on the soundtrack. It's what got me into such a unique duo in music in the first place. Apart from the third parties, there is also the music made in-house at Sega's own Wave Master Studio, of which I'm guessing these next 2 artists were working from. First there's Richard Jacques, a real jack-of-all-trades composer. Jacques has a lot of credits in a myriad of products, films, and commercials. So, with that being said, he doesn't have a style from what I can glean from with his work, but as far as the Jet Set Radio franchise is concerned, he only shows up every once in a while. But with one of the most memorable contributions musically from the first game, he comes up with the part ode, part parody of House of Pain's Jump Around, with his very own Everybody Jump Around. And beyond that, his output on Future is doubled into 2 songs. Both I think are on the level of Everybody Jump Around. Like, what about the Future? This cut starts out super spacey with these skittering hi-hats that then breaks out into this big beat frenzy later on. And I love Bachfresh with its screechy synths, solid bassline, and that ooh, I like that sample, and the immaculate turntable scratching that makes this track super killer. But of course, the other in-house Sega composer, at least at the time he was, who really needs a whole section of this video alone, is Hideki Naganuma. Hideki Naganuma is one of my favorite video game composers, and one of my favorite artists ever. He's worked on several A Classic project, like his work for the Jet Set Radio series here, his short but original soundtrack for Ollie King, to the composition work he did with Teruhiko Nakagawa on Sonic Rush. There's also the work he's done as Skankfunk for Air Gear and Kurohyo, and there's the solo tracks like Ain't Nothing Like a Funky Beat and Get It to Win It. In my eyes, this man is a legend of electronic dance music, and my love for his work started with Jet Set Radio Future. It's very hard not to notice his knack for tight sampling, funky beats, and loud, energetic tempos that show up all over this game. For example, Future opens up with one of his most iconic tracks, The Concept of Love. It catches your attention immediately with blistering guitar loops, then hones in with this really key vocal sample from Kwame Tori, aka Stokely Carmichael, that is just laid out so perfectly. The song then busts into this breakbeat section with a tight guitar groove that really cements the track in your mind. Another Jet Set Radio Future Naganuma track I love is Oldies But Happies. It's this really bouncy dance number that incorporates doo-wop singing, synths, bass, crowd sounds, and a great "let me hear you say yeah" call and response section. And finally, because I don't want this to take up much of the video, I'd also like to point out Like It Like This, Like That, which may be Naganuma's most concise song ever made. Seriously, there's not a moment wasted on here. From the samples to the beat, everything about this track is perfection. Personally, I think you should check out all of the original tracks Naganuma made for Future. But if you're a fan of the first Jet Set Radio, well, there's some returning Naganuma favorites in the form of remixes. And some of these remixes are from artists that appeared in the previous game, like disco house artist David Soul, who remixes the classic Humming the Bass line to be a lot more sparse, with more bass, skittering samples, and record scratching. There's also Toronto, who comes by for a remix of Sneak Man, making it into this smooth guitar sample laden big beat track, with tons of depth and unpredictability. And finally there's BB Rights, who provides several remixes themselves, one of my favorites being their take on Sweet Soul Brother. For me, they make it more nostalgic. It's very reverby, very sun-drenched, it's got a great shouted vocal sample, and the dynamics on this remix are perfect. It may just be one of my favorite remixes on the entire soundtrack, maybe of all time. I may sound like a broken record, but I really do think this soundtrack is a masterclass in video game score, and I hope you give it a listen, and are as enthusiastic as others who love this soundtrack as well. Of course, all of this, the mechanics, the design, the music, all of it would go to waste if there wasn't a great story to support it all. And in my opinion, Future delivers. If you played the original Jet Set Radio, then the plot of its sequel will be very familiar to you, as that's because the meat of both are relatively the same. Both revolve around you playing as the GGs, going against Tokyo Toe's street gangs and corrupt government to keep control of the streets for freedom of expression. There are even very specific plot beats that carry over between the two games, but there are significant differences that make Jet Set Radio Future's narrative stick out a lot more. One of those aspects would be the size and scope. There's more inserted in a Future story, making for more intrigue and twists. I also think the direction of the in-game cinematics are presented a lot more creatively. The cinematography is very expressive, and the editing keeps the pace up. Some of my favorite shots happen in the very beginning of the game, in which Goji Rokaku is being introduced. The story proper starts out with Yo-Yo wishing to be recruited by the GGs, who are relatively small at this point, at only 2 members. This is where the tutorial takes place, which is appropriate seeing as both you and Yo-Yo are newbies, and need to learn the ropes on how to skate. After your introduction comes a radio broadcast from Jet Set Radio. The streets of Tokyo Toe are being oppressed by the Rokaku Group, a gang of high-end business thugs led by Goji Rokaku. Goji's using his vast wealth to buy off everything. Businesses, politicians, and even the city's culture. He's planning on controlling everything in one fell swoop. But his plans are being foiled by the roller skating street gangs dubbed the Rudies, who go around spraying tags of graffiti on their turf and keeping the streets alive with creativity. But unfortunately for them, some dark forces going around causing trouble. And with Goji's Rokaku Expo just around the corner, the bought-off police are cracking down extra hard on whoever gets in Rokaku's way. The first third of the game involves your GGs going around the different sections of Tokyo Toe, having run-ins with all the local gangs, while trying to discover the dark force plaguing the streets. Everything is going well enough until Yo-Yo suddenly disappears. Meanwhile, a new group of cyborg skaters called the Noise Tanks enter the scene and rough up the territory of the Egyptian-themed immortals. Those mummies gotta know something about Yo-Yo's disappearance, so you head to their turfs and tag it to Kingdom Come. This eventually leads the immortals to escape to Highway 0, where you find out that it was they who kidnapped Yo-Yo and are currently caging him up. Of course, you kick their butts. However, once you go to free Yo-Yo, instead, a trap is sprung on you. Turns out, Yo-Yo was working for the immortals the whole time. What a betrayal! You're hauled off to the future site of the Rokaku Expo, a track and field stadium normally closed off to the public. There, the noise tanks are revealed to be the ones truly in control, and force you and the gangs they've defeated to go through games of Death Ball. Loser gets their brains taken over by the tanks. We'll stop here and take a little bit of a detour into the Death Ball portion for a bit, because in the context of the game, it's a new mechanic and a game mode introduced right at this point in time in the story. Death Ball is a game where you have to acquire a ball that's placed on the field, which is just this track loop like you might see in any other track and field. Once you get the ball, you have to complete a full lap around the track. Then you win. The challenge comes in where the other team is also trying to get the ball from you, and anytime they bump into you, the ball comes loose, and it's free game. The goal also becomes null during this, so whoever picks up the ball has to complete a full lap from that point. So you don't really want to drop the ball, because otherwise you'll have to play death ball longer, which you really don't want to do, because it's very boring and I think the worst part of Jet Set Radio Future for me, without a doubt in my mind. Mostly because the other AI team cannot catch up to you no matter what, so you just move in a circle without much of anything to slow you down. The only real challenge Death Ball possesses, if you could call it that, is with this useless pass feature, where I guess Smilebit had it in their mind that the passing would be used more prevalently, but because your team members won't handle the ball as well as you, you're better off controlling the ball the entire time. To make matters worse, the pass button is mapped to the boost button, so if you subconsciously try to boost to make the boring matches go by quicker, instead you'll throw the ball into nowhere, resetting the goal point, making you play even longer. And at 3 matches of required play, Death Ball becomes increasingly tedious. Once you get through your 3rd easy victory of Death Ball, the cops bust in and ruin the games. Police Chief Hayashi even shows up in a robot to try and kill you. Although, this brings me to yet another criticism I have of Jet Set Radio Future. This game tries to have boss fights, and most of them don't go over too well. Take Hayashi's robot. It's very easy to take down. All you really have to do is grind up its legs and tag its middle. There are tougher boss fights in the game, but they're tough for the wrong reasons. Either the areas they're in don't work well, or you aren't given enough paint, or sometimes how you beat the boss isn't communicated very well, and you're just left to guess how it's done. Hayashi's robot isn't the worst boss fight in the game, I'll get to that later, but it's indicative of the overall problem as a whole with the boss fights in this game, in which they're all very anticlimactic. After you take care of the police, you get the F out of Dodge and reconvene at your garage. The noise tanks are rampaging in the streets. It's time to get revenge on Yo-Yo. What follows is a somewhat tedious gameplay section where all you have to do is run into enough noise tanks in the street. They're all over the place, so you can't miss them, and they explode on contact, harming you a bit in the process. After pacifying the noise tanks fit, DJ Professor K relays some information over the radio that Yo-Yo has been seen in the skyscraper district. Further investigation leads you to a theme park in the sky, Sky Dinosaurian Square, where you'll have to tag the noise tanks' backs to get to Yo-Yo. Though, just as you have Yo-Yo in your grasp, the leader of Poison Jam, Cube, rushes in and reveals that the Yo-Yo you see is an imposter. It's another noise tank in disguise. The noise tanks tease you, but they don't get too much out before they're assassinated by a mysterious group in the shadows. Back in the streets of Tokyo-to, since the police couldn't take care of the Rudies, a new group of Rokaku-sanctioned assassins called the Golden Rhinos are taking their place. Meanwhile, all the losers of Death Ball had their brains washed and are now hunting the GGs to avenge their fallen masters. And things only continue to get worse, as Yo-Yo is still missing, and some kid named Clutch comes into your garage and steals important items of yours. It's time to get answers. You track down Clutch, and he gives you back your possessions. He also gives you the tip that Yo-Yo is being held in the fortified residential zone, which can be accessed via the sewers. There, Golden Rhinos spring a trap of their own onto the GGs. This time, the real Yo-Yo is being held in a cage, but now bombs are rigged all over the area to explode. Luckily, you get a generous time limit to go around defusing these bombs with your spray paint. Once that danger is averted, it's finally time to save Yo-Yo, but not before attack jets crash through the ceiling to take care of you once and for all. But, like the other boss fights, you can take them down very easily, and rescue Yo-Yo in the process. Turns out, he was captured when he went out to confirm a rumor that the Golden Rhinos were the ones going around messing with the streets. Now that Yo-Yo is free, and the GGs are still around, the Golden Rhinos now set their sights on another target, and take to the streets to find him. It's here where you'll go through 2 more boss fights, a rhino with mechanical arms, and a pyromaniac. Once you take care of these 2, DJ Professor K tries to give you more information over the radio, but he's interrupted. Turns out the rhinos set their sights on him. Now they're hauling him off, and his studio, to some place. Following it, you have a run-in with a strange robotic doppelganger of one of your GG members, Beat. This robot Beat leads you to the site of the Tokyo line. There, you see DJ Professor K being hauled off. Meanwhile, some out-of-this-world machine is bustling along the tracks. Whatever it is, it must be stopped. This wacky train is, in my opinion, the worst boss fight in the game. It's what I was alluding to earlier. As mentioned prior, the train circles around the tracks. Your job is to follow it and tag the 2 generators on its back. While you're doing that, the train will launch missiles and electrify the tracks you're on. So far so good. Tedium comes in at the speed this fight goes at. The train moves as fast as you do when you're at your top speeds grinding on train tracks. It takes a very long time just to catch up to the thing, and even if you do, it still takes a lot of paint just to cover up one generator. You're going to be fighting this train for a while, and most of it will be playing catch up. Once you finally take care of the train, the final act of the game sets in motion. Goji Rokaku broadcasts from a weird looking tower. He calls himself DJ Big Goji, and claims that the Rokaku Expo is beginning at this moment. Goji reveals that he seeks to teach Tokyo To the true meaning of art, and the weird music he's blasting from his tower will be the music that defines the future of the world. Your GGs arrive at Shibuya Terminal, the location of Goji's tower. It's huge and surreal. It sticks out like a sore thumb, but it's not finished. You see that it's sucking up people, using their demons to make the art of despair. To round more people up, Goji sends out more robot beats. Of course, you intercept them and ruin Goji's plan. DJ Professor K even breaks through Goji's broadcast and plays his own futuristic music. In fact, this inspires him to redub his radio station to now be called Jet Set Radio Future. Angered, Goji makes one last attempt at taking over the world by sucking up the GGs. Now you're inside Goji's tower, and it's a warped, psychedelic nightmare. The people's demons give you chase, the environments are broken up and defy logic, and Goji turns himself into a hulking robot. This is where the final boss of the game takes place. Your goal is to use the broken environment to get to the top of the area, and use graffiti to tag up the robot Goji. It's not a difficult boss fight by any means. The environment around you is the toughest you'll encounter in the entire game, and figuring out how to damage Goji can be a little vague, but once you got him figured out, it's really easy to take him down. Though you don't want to die at all during this fight, as if you do, you'll be taken all the way back to fighting the robot Beats in Shibuya Terminal. And the cutscenes in the game aren't skippable, so it's a lot of wasted time you'll go through. Just take your time, learn the environment, and make sure you have enough spray cans when you get up to the robot Goji. After you conquer the final boss of the game, Goji's tower is destroyed. An epilogue narrated from DJ Professor K says that freedom once again belongs to the streets, and while the evils that caused Goji to exist in the first place, greed, gluttony, power, they will always exist. But the graffiti that your gang left behind will always be a reminder of how Tokyo To took a stand against such a tyrant. But the GGs aren't interested in fame or fortune. They're content with living freely on the streets, tagging as they play, and jamming out to their favorite tunes. At 8 hours, the story of Jet Set Radio Future is gripping and sweeping. It's easy to get caught up in it all, and pretend as if you're the one skating around making a stand. It's a real shame once it's over. If only there were things to do after finishing the story. That's right, there is actually stuff you can do after taking down DJ Big Goji. There are 2 post-game activities you can partake in, Jet Challenges and Multiplayer. Let's start with Jet Challenges first. While playing Jet Set Radio Future's campaign, you may notice the graffiti souls hanging around the environments. They're the big shiny skater icon looking things that rotate around. They're hard to miss sometimes because they're so shiny. Just like in the first Jet Set Radio Future, collecting graffiti souls will unlock more graffiti patterns which you can switch around and set in your garage. Some designs return from the first game, and all new ones also make up the roster. So, it's fun to collect a bunch of souls, then return to your base to see what you got. In Future, there's more to graffiti souls than that. In addition to the souls, you may also notice the mystery tapes that are in each area of the game. Collecting one of these will unlock the street challenges in the area you got it in. These street challenges will then become available to complete, and will be logged in your start menu. Street challenges normally come in 5 molds that you can conquer once you learn the location enough. There are grind combos, which are the amount of tricks you have to complete in a single grind. Then there's air combos, which is the amount of tricks you have to do while in the air. Trick combos are the amount of tricks you have to string together without breaking your combo, which is broken by touching the ground mostly. Point combos are interesting, as I purposely didn't explain a certain facet of pulling off tricks until we got to this point. You see, as you pull off tricks, you get points for accomplishing them successfully, and as you do more tricks, a multiplier will go up, causing you to gain even more points. Now, if you use the X button to pull off the tricks, the highest multiplier you'll get is a ×8 multiplier, but you could get a ×16 multiplier if you only do Y button tricks. Why? I don't know, as it isn't more difficult to do a Y only trick grind, but I guess the developers thought Y only tricks deserved more reward. So to accomplish a points combo challenge, you need to get the amount of points required in only one grind, so finding the best spots that get you the most points is key. Finally, there are mystery event driven challenges. These are normally very specific to the area you're in. Some areas don't even have these. When you do have to complete one of these mystery challenges, the hint in the pause menu will normally be esoteric. You have to unravel what the developers are trying to tell you. These challenges can include grinding up a chimney, circling around gates, or going up and down a grind without touching the ground. Completing any one of these street challenges in an area will then unlock a new graffiti soul. You still have to find it, but it's a great reward for applying your learned skills. These challenges are also designed so that you can naturally do them through play. It was quite often when I would see a good spot to pull off tricks, then satisfied myself by completing the challenge through my own problem solving. Of course, there's even more to it than even that. Once you collect all the graffiti souls in an area, you should then talk to Roboy, the robot hanging out in your garage. Roboy will have a new option you can select, called Jet Challenges. These can truly put your skills to the test, as you have to get the best score possible in each category to unlock something truly special. For each area of the game, you unlock 3 of the 4 possible Jet Challenge types for that specific area. It'll always be Jet Graffiti, Jet Tech, and either Jet Flag or Jet Race. Jet Graffiti is where you have to tag locations while being timed. These are pretty lenient, and all of the graffiti is usually lined up neatly. Knowledge of each tag location and how to get to each optimally is the key skill you'll need to succeed. Jet Tech is where you'll have to work with points again, and I think this is the most redundant Jet Challenge here. The challenge is that you have to get as much points as possible within a certain time frame. Not a bad idea, but the idea gets played to death, as you're pretty much grinding in one area for about 5 minutes, using only that Y button. As long as you know where the best spot to get points is, which the game normally puts you next to anyway when you start this challenge, then this is the most repetitive thing Jet Set Radio Future has going on in the entire game. Next is Jet Race, where you have to race around the area as quick as possible. This tests your memorization skills of where grind rails are, and where billboards are, and stuff like that. I really like these. They put you to the test. And finally, there's Jet Flag, where you have to collect flags that pop up throughout the map. These are actually based on flag battles you partake in with rival gangs, with the difference being that there are AI you have to best in the main game, while the challenges are just you trying to collect flags as fast as possible. Whether you get an area that gives you a Jet Flag challenge or Jet Race challenge is usually dependent on how the map is laid out. The more sprawling locations get flags, and more linear locations get races. Regardless, once you get a Jet ranking in all of the area's challenges, you unlock a new character that joins your GG crew. These are normally rivals you've already fought in the game, so you can play as the Immortals, Poison Jam, or even Goji himself. So, if you want to have the best version of the GGs possible, always look out for graffiti souls and mystery tapes, complete street challenges once you're ready, then master your skills with the Jet challenges. Now, that's all one way you can extend your play with Jet Set Radio Future, beyond the story. But there is another, and you can experience it with friends. Yes, Future has multiplayer to it, and from developer interviews, the team at Smilebit viewed this addition as very important. They weren't able to include multiplayer in the original Jet Set Radio due to various constraints. So they made sure to include it in the sequel here, and pushed for players to partake in it. So, how is it? Well, I think it's fine. I don't think this mode is something you're going to be playing Jet Set Radio Future for anyway, but I still think it's important to give it a try at least once to fulfill the developer's wishes. It supports up to 4 players, and can only be played offline, locally. There are 5 modes you can choose from, 3 of which take place within the actual levels from the story, while the other 2 take place in special arenas. Of these modes, you've got racing, graffiti spraying, flag collection, tagging others' backs, and death ball. I'd say the racing and graffiti spraying are amongst the best experience Jet Set Radio Future's multiplayer offers, while tagging each other's backs comes off as the worst because of how tedious it can get. Though, I think the worst aspect about the multiplayer feature, and what keeps it from being any good, is its lack of ability for novice players to pick it up and play it. Because, despite my love for the game, Jet Set Radio Future can be an awkward game to just try and pick up and play. It takes a bit of time to get a handle on things, thus, when it comes to multiplayer, unless I'm playing against someone else who has their own copy of the game and has been playing it, then what's going to happen is an extremely one-sided match where the more inexperienced party will not enjoy themselves. It's a shame, because there could have been improvements of this feature on further installments of Jet Set Radio Future, but that would not come to be. After Jet Set Radio Future, Sega has not released a follow-up to the franchise since. Smilebit as a development division, as well as the other Sega-related divisions that we talked about way earlier, were merged back into the core company around 2004. Many of the key staff of Jet Set Radio are either working on other projects or have completely left Sega entirely. For example, director Masayoshi Kikuchi and art lead Ryota Ueda now work primarily with the Yakuza franchise. They haven't forgotten the Jet Set Radio games though. One way they keep their past projects alive in their current works is by having a reoccurring character named Goji in the Yakuza games. On the musical side of things, Hideki Naganuma left Sega sometime in 2008, and has since created music for the Air Gear anime, for indie games, and even remixed a Persona song recently. So, all of the key members of Jet Set Radio Future have moved on, and the series has been dormant for years, but that doesn't mean it's lost its relevancy. If anything, players crave Jet Set Radio as much as they do today, as much as they probably would have back then. There is a strong, passionate community online that love these games, love making art inspired by them, and talking about the music and the style of it all. There have been several projects that have come in the wake of Jet Set Radio in order to carry the torch of its legacy and revitalize the magic. In terms of music, there's Jet Set Radio Live, an online virtual radio station that plays Jet Set Radio inspired tunes, hosts chat rooms, and other community features. There's also been many fan tribute albums to the music of Jet Set Radio, including the fantastic Memories of Tokyo To by Tumelo, a tribute album of original tracks inspired by the sound of Jet Set Radio. Speaking of Tumelo, he and another creator by the name of Canaanaut worked with Jet Set Radio Live for a contest called Jet Set Sona, where the community could draw their own Jet Set Radio inspired characters on social media. On the game's software side of things, there's a fan-run project based on the multiplayer of Jet Set Radio Future, built from the ground up for people to play online. There are also several indie games taking cues from Jet Set Radio, and forging their own paths with their own ideas like Hover, Neon Tail, and the recently announced Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. So, Jet Set Radio and Jet Set Radio Future has not faded from obscurity. Far from it. It's got the kind of dedicated fan base that beg and plead for Sega to release a follow-up. But honestly, now that I've played Jet Set Radio and revisited its sequel, I could not disagree more with that crowd. Primarily because of a staff quote from an interview that really opened my eyes into what core aspect makes Jet Set Radio as a franchise so good. Quote, "This was more than 10 years ago, but producer Kawagoe once told us, 'You guys are too old and experienced to make a new Jet. If someone were to make a new Jet, it's going to have to be young daredevils like you guys were back then.' And I completely agree. I've gained enough experience that I can identify what works and how to present things. I can see the path to the end goal, whether I like it or not. If I put it negatively, because of my experience, I can only create games in the smart way. This means that I wouldn't be able to convey that passion in this title that could have only been born through all the struggles I faced. that's why I'm looking forward to a new generation of creators. Don't you see? More than the graffiti, more than the music, more than the style, the primary appeal of Jet Set Radio has to do with us. We are the GGs, the youth that defy established convention and instead forge our own path by climbing up buildings, flying through the air, and taking down bad guys like superheroes. But not like the old superheroes, we're our own new type of hero, the kind that has our own culture, our own beliefs, and our own voice. And we're ready to take on all comers, whether it be small thugs, big politicians, or abstract oppression elements. That's what makes Jet Set Radio Future so engaging and relevant today. It reminds us that the impossible can be challenged using our own methods. So, instead of demanding some business like Sega to make something we're familiar with, let's instead take to the streets of the internet and paint our own version of the GGs. 2020's GGs. But that doesn't mean the past should be forgotten either. We can still look back and learn from what's come before. Meaning that I think it's still absolutely essential to play Jet Set Radio Future today. Its fantastic gameplay, gripping story, and unforgettable presentation make it one of the most standout achievements in video games. And it shows us how to take the popular culture of today and turn it into a statement for the future. So what do you say? Are you hearing this or what? Is your heart pounding with the beat? Am I getting through to you? Show me what you got. I'm counting on y'all.